Hey everybody, welcome back to the GOAZCATS.com football preview show. It's been a while since we've been together. This is senior editor Matt Moreno with staff writer Troy Hutchison of GOAZCATS.com. No Joe Tafoya. He's our third member of this team, but has some other obligations to tend to. But hopeful we can get him back later in the season. Hopefully we can get some other guests on later in the season. But obviously a lot different conversation this year than last year, Troy. About Arizona football. A lot of optimism, even more than last year. Obviously, every coaching change kind of brings its own new optimism. But for Arizona, a lot of talent, kind of turnover over the last several months. Since the ASU game, Jedd Fisch was really all about, hey, let's turn this thing over and figure out what we can do to not win, one game again. They want to win more than one game, and they want to make it to bowl games and have this thing going in the right direction. And so went out and put together one of the biggest recruiting classes Arizona's ever had, one of the best recruiting classes Arizona's ever had, highlighted by a 5-star recruit. Something I don't know in my decade plus covering this team. I don't know that I thought I would ever say that, in my time covering the team, that Arizona was going to sign a 5-star recruit, beat out so many other programs for TMAC, for Tetero McMillan. Oregon was obviously the school he was committed to. They had a coaching change, opened the door for Arizona. He ends up being, the crown jewel of this 2022 class. But there's a lot of talent in this class, Troy. A lot of new faces on this team. It wasn't just the recruiting class. It's not just the freshmen that are coming in, which will be, a big part of what the new contributors are. But there's a lot of key transfers, including a couple on offense that are going to be really high impact players. So what are some of your takeaways from this offseason? Obviously, it feels like it's been a really long one. As I mentioned, the conversation is much different this year than it was last year. Everyone was kind of just getting used to whatever Jedd Fisch was going to be. And there were still a lot of questions about what he brought to the table as a coach. We now know a lot more. So what has the last 9 or 10 months been like for Arizona? And what are some of your things that, you're intrigued about going into this Saturday's game against San Diego State?
Yeah, Jedd Fisch talked about it being kind of last year being year 0, this one being officially year 1, even though it is year 2 underneath Coach Jedd Fisch. And the biggest takeaways this offseason, let's talk about the quarterback play, because last season Arizona didn't have any stability there with injuries, poor play, and just really couldn't find a guy to get it done. And now all of a sudden you have Jayden de Laura, Pac-12 Offensive Freshman of the Year for Washington State, comes in, highly regarded, I believe a 4-star recruit out of Hawaii originally, and now he's on your roster. So Arizona goes from having no one on the roster that they can rely upon to a guy that is one of the better quarterbacks, not only in the Pac-12, but across the country as well. And then, Jacob Cowing. Jacob Cowing led UTEP in receptions and receiving yards and had 7 touchdowns to go along with that as well. And he finished top 10 in receiving yards in the NCAA. And, with all the talent they brought in, he might be the best player on the team. Arizona hasn't had this special of a receiver in a while.
So obviously that's one of the key players. In terms of the newcomers, adding the freshmen and the transfers together, give me 2 of the most impactful players as we sit here, before this game against San Diego State, ahead of the season, before the opener, who are going to be 2 of the top 2, impact newcomers for this team in your mind.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to stay away from the guys I just mentioned because I think that's kind of the obvious choice there. But for me, number 1 is Jonah Savinea, offensive lineman out of Hawaii, a high 3-star recruit. The kid's the total package. I mean, he came in at 340, and you're like, wow, that's a little too big. And all of a sudden, he's down to 326. He was able to lose 14 pounds in a short 2-month span from arriving on campus and then working with the team during spring ball. And once he got slotted into that starting role during spring, he's never looked back. And he really looks the part of a potential all-conference, next level offensive lineman. And you don't see that from a lot of freshmen. He's got the size, quickness, agility, and he's a smart kid as well. And then the defensive end, we're going to go back to transfers being a role. And Hunter Echols, very experienced football player, obviously played at USC and under Coach Nansen at some point in time at USC. And he's just a guy that's been around the block, and he knows what he's doing. He knows what the coaches expect. He's leading the defense in many ways, and he just goes out there and plays football. And he looks a little bit better than what he did at USC the last couple of years. Maybe having that familiarity with Coach Nansen helps out a lot. So I think those are two guys that are going to have a huge impact on this game coming up.
Well, and sometimes it's just a bigger opportunity for a player that changes things. A different setting is something that's going to help him out a lot, potentially. But it would be huge if they could get Hunter Echols to play like the 4-star recruit that he was. I remember him, as a high school recruit, and he was very highly touted. Actually visited Arizona back, when he was a high school junior, and was looking pretty heavily at Arizona before he ended up picking USC. But, that'd be big for Arizona if they're able to get him to be the player that everyone thought he was going to be coming out of high school, because not only just for the pure fact that he's going to help the team and, provide some, plays for the team, but what it'll do for Jalen Harris as well on the other side. I think it'll make it, difficult for teams to really game plan against one guy over the other. So, you add some, more depth to the defensive line, you add some new players. They're going to try and rotate in a lot of guys. I think you expect to get Keon Barnes pretty healthy. Maybe not right away, but at least a few games into the season, getting him back to fully healthy. And that'll be a big boost for this defensive line. But, as you look at this team right now, maybe not even taking into account just the San Diego State game, but just overall, what are the things that you're most eager to see maybe early in the season during the non-conference portion? It's not an easy non-conference schedule. It's pretty daunting, especially for a team coming off a season where they won, one game. You have San Diego State opened up a brand new stadium on the road. You have Mississippi State, an SEC team coached by Mike Leach, who's had a ton of success against Arizona teams back when he was at Washington State. And then you have, the FCS champions, North Dakota State, coming in. We'll talk about, our predictions for the season a little bit later in the show. But for you, what are some things that are maybe most intriguing to you about what you want to see most from this team? Some things you're really eager to see, not only Saturday, but as this season rolls on, especially early in the year.
Yeah, we talk about the talent influx at Arizona. And last year, Coach Fisch, this is his first true year being a head coach ever in his 14, 15-year career. And you saw kind of some coaching pains early on, I thought, where he just didn't have a feel for the game. They were driving, and then all of a sudden a trick play would happen, and they would turn it over, or they're running the football down the opponent's throat, and he mixes in a screen pass and it gets picked off. I think that's one of the biggest things is now you have the talent. Let's see if he can come up with the game plan and stick to a game plan that works for the team. Personally, I think he does have that ability, but I think it's going to be a learning process for any young head coach. And that's the number one thing I'm excited for is just his development as a head coach, getting a little bit better feel for the game than he had last season. Number two is Coach Nansen. Don Brown did a terrific job with the talent he had here at Arizona. And, there were some times where they weren't deep enough to rotate guys in and out, and guys were getting tired and they were getting burned downfield, burned in the running game. Coach Nansen seems like he has a good idea of what he wants to do, switching to that zone defense, isn't afraid to mix things up, I have a feeling. So there is a little bit of a talent influx there as well. But I just want to see how this defensive staff works, because it's a lot of the same faces from when Coach Brown was there. And now they're working under Coach Nansen, and they seem to all get along pretty well. But you're talking about two different styles and concepts, and just seeing how everything mixes when you still have guys from the old staff and you're trying to teach a new system to not only the players, but your current staff as well.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, because I think a system like Jedd Fisch wants to run, maybe this is less so on the defensive side, but a system like Jedd Fisch wants to run, it's a pro style scheme. It is very pro style. Some teams say they run a pro style offense. Arizona truly wants to run a pro style offense that you can see on Sundays. And that's kind of the appeal for a lot of the new players that are, arriving on this team. It looks like what you'll see the Rams do on Sunday and several other teams, because Jedd Fisch has been at different spots, where they run this type of system. But, I think one of the things is it's difficult to learn, and I think they needed some time to learn it. But I also think when you have better players and more talent, it can make up for a lot of, growing pains or whatever you have as a coach and a play caller. I think they have, I know they have more talent on this team than they did last year, especially offensively. You just look across the board and there's just not, a lot of as many holes at least. I mean, up front, I think there's still a lot of question marks from the fan base, especially behind the starting group. I think there's a lot of questions about if somebody goes down, what do they do? What does Arizona do? But, at least across the board offensively, you look at the receiver position. I mean, you can go up and down the entire position and all those guys can play. I mean, from 1 to however many receivers they have on this roster, 14 or whatever it is, everybody can play. And that's a great spot to be in. So I think it's going to be... Go ahead.
Sorry, to that point, I mean, you have a guy like Rex Haynes, who former 3-star recruit decided to walk on at Arizona. I think in most years, he might be a factor this season where he's able to get on the field in some spurts. This year, I don't see it at all, but it doesn't mean he's not talented.
Well, even a guy like Jamari Joyner is like third on your depth chart at a position. I mean, that's crazy to think about because we all have seen what he can do. And I think that just speaks to the talent level at the receiver position. It'll be very interesting to see how many of those guys can get on the field. Sometimes coaches in their mind, it looks a lot better than, and on paper, it looks a lot better than what it looks like on the field. And they say, yes, I'm going to play all these guys. And then you go, well, as the season goes along, you just don't play as many of those guys because they start to, get comfortable with certain guys that are making plays. And you don't want to necessarily go away from those guys that are making plays. But that's a really impressive position for Arizona. Running back is obviously impressive. You have, your leading rusher from the team last year is way down on the depth chart as well. You have some just quality new pieces that are on this team that are going to be, I think, very impactful offensively. But to my original point is that it just feels like there's been a talent upgrade, across the board at a lot of different positions. And I think that can help do what, Jedd Fisch wants to do a little bit easier. I asked him about that at Pac-12 Media Day. He didn't really give a super straightforward answer, but I think he kind of hinted at, I can do more of what I kind of want to do and wanted to do last year. With this new talent that I have, I think it's going to allow him to open up some things, especially someone like Jacob Cowan, who is a game changer. Yes, the expectation is that, someone like T-Mac is going to be a star player and be a standout for this team. Obviously, Dorian Singer is going to have a bigger role this year, but Jacob Cowan is proven. And that's exactly what this team needs. It's someone you can count on and you say he's going to go do some things. And that's not even to mention the guy throwing in the ball. Jaden DeLora, very proven. I know maybe there was some moments in camp where he was going a little bit sluggish. Looked like Noah Fafita was maybe being the most consistent quarterback throughout camp. Maybe that's still the case that Noah Fafita was the most consistent quarterback in camp. But obviously Jaden DeLora, everyone kind of saw, when he made that shift and started to pick things up a little bit easier and really stepped into that role of being the starting quarterback for this team, which puts him in a lot different position. And kind of, I want to talk about that a little bit, Troy. What do you think that does for this team, knowing that there isn't that question mark at the quarterback position, that they know who their guy is going to be? And he's a proven guy who just, oh, by the way, is coming off, a Pac-12 freshman of the year season last year.
Yeah. I think it does wonders because, Coach Fisch talked about it a week and a half ago, as they're getting ready for San Diego State and training camp's over, they already know their guy. That wasn't the case, I would say, until probably about 3 or 4 days before the game last season against BYU, going into that game. And when you had that, you just have a bunch of guys standing around like, man, who's going to be our leader?
And not to cut you off, did they know that 4 or 5 days before the game? Because they went into that game with 2 quarterbacks.
They did, but in fairness, Gunnar Cruz got the majority of those reps. I think maybe a little bit of gamesmanship there by Coach Fisch, but then again, it wasn't a huge gap. This one is a big gap. Who's the guy, and when you have guys standing around wondering who's going to be the leader, because on any football team, no matter if he's the star of the team or just runs the offense, the quarterback is your leader. He sets the tone for the rest of the game in terms of attitude, play how he's doing, and just confidence out there. And that's one thing about Jaden that's very true. He is a confident quarterback, and I think it rubs off on players.
All right, so let's now, get into this game. Obviously, last year, Arizona, San Diego State ended up winning it 38-14. It was kind of out of hand pretty quickly in that game. If you remember, kind of started the turmoil at the quarterback position, started a lot of things for this team. When you left that game, I think you said this is going to be a long season. And so They got down in a hurry, went down 21-0 in the first quarter. First, I believe 8 minutes or so, maybe even 7 minutes of that game went down 21-0. Could never really recover. San Diego State ran all over them. It was all bad for the most part. San Diego State returns a lot of those players. They're a pretty good team. So what are you looking at, this weekend and what are some things that you're going to have on your mind as you're watching Arizona and San Diego State at the brand new Snapdragon Stadium?
Not Dragon Slayer like T-Mac thought.
That's what Arizona's trying to be. They're trying to be a Dragon Slayer.
Exactly.
As weird as that sounds, going up against a Mountain West team in San Diego State, but I think it'll be an upset if Arizona wins. They won one game last year. I guess that's how it's being billed. I don't know, but continue.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the number one thing is the line of scrimmage. That's how you win football games. And last season, let's be honest, Arizona got punked, both on the offensive side and defensive side on the line of scrimmage. San Diego State's running back ran for, I believe, 150-something yards. I know they finished with 271 yards. I believe he's still running. I mean, that's how bad that game was. It was a quick start for the Aztecs, and they didn't look back. And then on the defensive end, Arizona couldn't get anything going against that Aztec defense. They rushed for 51 yards, and the passing game wasn't much better. So it starts on the line of scrimmage. Arizona looks to have an improved offensive line, but until you get into a game, who truly knows? And then on the defensive line, I think this is the best defensive line unit Arizona's had potentially since the Mike Stoops era. It's big, it's physical, has a little bit of inexperience, but has a good amount of veteran leadership. They just got to get into a game, and they're going to be able to rotate guys in and out. But what do they do against an offensive line in San Diego State that is known for running the football? And that was something that Arizona was poor at defending last season. So I think the line of scrimmage is the number one thing to look for.
As I get into this game, obviously I think one of the intriguing things is just how they're going to score points. They have to get into the red zone.
Yeah.
That wasn't the issue last year. It was once you get into the red zone, what do you do then? So what do you think the key is going to be to make this year different, starting with Saturday's game when they do get into the red zone? Obviously, they've added a ton of height at the receiver positions at tight end. But they've also added some guys, I think, at running back that can do some different things and help them, in those short yardage situations and help them once they get, inside the red zone. So that's kind of been the big kind of other topic this offseason. So how do you see Arizona and things playing out in the red zone? Who is going to be the guy that gets them over that hump?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of guys, because last year I don't think you truly had a guy that stood out. You had Michael Wiley, good running back in the red zone, but this season you have two running backs that could take the ball in the red zone because you kind of want a bulldozing back. Yeah, Jonah Coleman, who for my money is kind of like a Warwick Dunn, Maurice Jones-Drew type of running back, very physical, gets low to the ground, and that's perfect for the red area. And then you had DJ Williams from Florida State, who's a big, powerful back that looks to hit people. So you have that aspect in the red zone. And then if you're looking for the air attack, obviously T-Mac, the guy's long, lengthy. I could see a lot of fade routes to him in the back corner. But then you have Kean Burnett and Alex Lyons. I think Arizona has finally realized they need to use the tight end. They've recruited the tight end position very well this past recruiting season and added some other guys via transfer. The tight end position is finally back at Arizona. It's the first time I've felt confident in saying that since basically Gronk. But Burnett is a legit guy. I mean, he's got size. The physicality, maybe you question a little bit in terms of run blocking, but he's been working on that as well. But he is a tough guard for any linebacker or safety because I think he has enough speed to beat linebackers and enough strength to overmatch safeties. So he's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the red zone this season.
So obviously, last year we did a lot when we had Joe, and every week we did this show. We talked about 3 players to watch. So I want to get into that for this week's game. We've mentioned a lot of guys already. Who are your 3 players to watch in this upcoming game?
Yeah, number one, I would probably go with Jayden de Laura. I know we talked about him being amazing, and he is this all conference quarterback in the Pac-12, but it is his first game under center for Arizona. He did have to learn a new system in a pro-style offense compared to the spread offense. So just seeing how he is out there when you have 37,000 fans screaming at you, just seeing what goes on in between his head, and just being in that environment and trying to control the offense. I think that's number one. Number two, I'm going to actually go with an offensive lineman here, and I want to see what Jonas Avenea does against that front seven or front line of San Diego State, because they do run the 3-3-5. But San Diego State's a very good defensive team. They get after the quarterback. They stop the run. So let's just see what Jonah can do in his first collegiate game. And then finally, I think one of the most underrated matchups to watch is going to be Christian Roland Wallace versus San Diego State's top returning receiver, who caught 9 touchdown passes a year ago. They finally have Braxton Burmeister, so it's a little bit of that as well. I think Burmeister is a little bit better than the previous quarterback they had last season, but he does have his issues as well. So can they make plays in the secondary? And, Christian Roland Wallace has looked the part of an all-conference corner this offseason. He's gotten a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical, looks to be clearing some things up in terms of going up against physical guys. We saw him struggle last season when he went up against the Drake Londons of the world, but he seems to added that element to his game. So can he make some plays that, changes the tide for Arizona?
I'm going to join in here as well. But one guy I wanted to bring up is Josh Baker. Obviously missed some time. There's going to be a lot put on his shoulders this year. He's the new center. He's a starting center. There's going to be a lot expected of him. Your first game with he's not a new quarterback, but he's a new quarterback to Arizona, Jaden DeLora. Josh Baker has, played before. He has some experience, but now it's all on his shoulders at that center position. You have to do a lot at center, at the college level. And so, especially in a pro style system. So I'm going to be really interested to see if he can handle that workload, handle those responsibilities, and if he's able to really kind of guide things up front, because if the play up front is improved, I think my perception of what this season could be for Arizona changes. I'm still not sold, that the offensive line is going to be leaps and bounds better than it was last year. And it wasn't great last year. I mean, they had to do a lot of work this offseason, and it feels like they've made progress, but you don't really know until you see them against another team. And so this will be a good test, but I want to see kind of where it starts. And I think it starts, in the middle and works its way out. You have your 2 tackles, but I really interested to see what Josh Baker does. That's one guy that I was, that I'm going to be looking at on Saturday. And then Isaiah Rutherford is an interesting one. Obviously, Traden Stukes has gone through some, issues, and who knows what his status is going to be. I know Jedd Fisch has continued to say he expects him to play, but if not, Isaiah Rutherford is going to get his opportunity, because he's kind of fallen back a little bit. He came in last year and everyone said, oh, he's this guy from Notre Dame, one of the top recruits in his class when he was coming out of high school, and just didn't really live up to it. And I think the talent is still there. I think you watch him play and you go, there's still talent there. You still see a lot of the things that so many college coaches saw when he was coming out of high school. It just hasn't quite come together. I think he's been banged up at times, especially last year. I think there was some injury issues he had to work through, but it'll be an opportunity for him to step up and showcase, his abilities and say, no, I need to be on this field, more than you're expecting, assuming if Traden Stukes can't go. And then Colby Cage is an interesting one. I didn't know what to think, coming into this season. We saw him in the spring a little bit. You say, okay, I can kind of see, he's making progress. You see that, but he looked different in camp. I thought he looked like he had taken the offseason program pretty seriously, looked bigger, looked more like a linebacker than a safety. And I think that's important. And obviously, he's stepping into that starting will position role in this system. It's going to be a key role. He's going to have to do a lot, but I think he fits it well. And if he can have success, I think that, that means good things for Arizona. Obviously, Malik Reed is the other guy that's kind of worked at linebacker a little bit, has, been in there as well, has done some different things in there as well. So we'll see what happens with him. They have Anthony Solomon, transfer from Michigan, who can work at that will position as well. It feels like Jerry Roberts pretty much has the Mike situation kind of all locked up, but that will position is going to be interesting in it. And assuming it is Colby Cage, I know Johnny Anson, when he spoke this week, didn't really want to settle on anybody having earned a starting job. The depth chart was kind of just a piece of paper, I think, to him, but Colby Cage is at the top of the list. I'm really interested to see if he is the starter on Saturday, what he can do, because this is going to be his first really big opportunity. And I think if he can do some different things and do some good things for Arizona, puts them in a really strong spot. Mm-hmm. Moving forward now, Troy, one thing I want to talk about is the upcoming season. We'll get to our prediction for Saturday coming up at the end, but the upcoming season, obviously, I think we're in 2 different schools of thought here. Obviously, you've grown up around Arizona. You understand, the program, the team. I've covered the team for a decade now. What do you see right now in terms of what this season is going to look like? I know fans are kind of almost eternally optimistic every time around this year. They see things and they go, this is the year, this is the time that they make that big jump. I know my feelings are that this team is probably still a year away. I think there's a lot of talent on this team. I think there's going to be more talent, next year. I still think they're a year away. I think once this young group gets some experience underneath its belt, I think it is going to be, a really strong group. And I do think they're going to, rack up some wins. I just don't think they're there yet. But when you look at the schedule, I'm going to pull it up right now. We already mentioned the non-conference schedule, 3 non-conference, tough non-conference games. You roll right into Pac-12 play after that. How are you viewing this season? What's your outlook for this entire season before, Arizona gets started here on Saturday?
Yeah, you know what? I think the schedule at first is tougher than it looks. If you just threw the names North Dakota State, Mississippi State, and San Diego State, and you didn't really focus in on football, I don't think you know how tough that is. But then after that, you have Cal, you have Colorado. Those are 2 winnable games. And then you hit a gauntlet. But then you finish with Washington State and Arizona State. And in my opinion, I think Arizona State could be one of the worst teams in the Pac-12 this season with how much they've lost during the offseason and all the coaching changes and the turmoil that program's going through. I think Arizona right now as a program is they're close. They're similar to what Arizona was underneath Mike Stoops from that 2006, 2007 era. Those 2 years were 2006, they won 6 games. 2007, they took a step back and won 5. And it seemed like they were always in these games, pulled off a few upsets, but just couldn't get that big win to get over the hump. 2006, they didn't make a bowl game. Not everybody and their mother made the bowl game back then. So I think they're somewhere in that range. Right now, I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic, and I think they're going to win 6 games. I think they are going to get to a bowl game this season. I like how the schedule sets up, and I do think there's 1 upset and 1 bad loss. Maybe Cal being the bad loss. I think that's a team you should probably beat. And a team like Oregon or USC upset at home. I think those are 2 teams that, yes, they have more talent than Arizona, but you can catch them napping on any given Saturday here in Tucson, and they might overlook the team, and I could see Arizona plucking one of them.
My thoughts on this. We've talked about this a lot. Mm-hmm. Obviously, everyone here doesn't necessarily know all my thoughts on this, but as I mentioned, I just think they're a year away from really being a bowl team, being more competitive. I think the games are going to be a lot more entertaining. I think they're going to be a lot closer. I think they're going to win some of those toss-up games that they didn't win last year. I don't think they're going to get blown out a lot. And it's that next natural step in this progression. I think going from 1 win, which your 1 win came against a team that was, riddled with guys that, were out because of COVID issues, from going from that to 6 wins, I think is a bit much. I just do. I understand there's a lot of talent on this team. I kind of know the talent better than anybody. I've watched a lot of these guys play, especially the top tier guys. I know what they bring to the table. But I'm just not sold on that jump just yet. I do think they're going to make a jump. I do think, I have them winning 4 games this year. I think that's very doable. I think we'll understand exactly what this team is, as we say every year, when the non-conference schedule is over and we know what type of team they are. If they go 2-1, I think they do have a chance to reach that 6-game kind of plateau that you're talking about. But I don't know that I see 2 wins in that non-conference schedule. It's tough. I mean, if they beat San Diego State, then I'm more confident in that for sure. But if they lose this opener, I think it's going to be tough to win 6 games like you're saying. And so I think a lot is going to depend on that. But I don't see the schedule being as favorable as you think it is. I think there's some difficulty in there, especially in the middle. It gets really rough. And if they're not ready for it, if they have some, a couple really bad games, I think it could be one of those seasons where it kind of, tips off at the end and they kind of tail off at the end and struggle at the end of the year. But I just don't see 6 games, but I do see progress. Like I said, I think they are going to win more games than last year. I mean, it's hard to not do that. But I think that, they're going to make some progress. I think, again, it's going to be a lot closer games, a lot more competitive, a lot more fun. I think once you have this much talent on the roster, I think there's going to be some fun plays, some fun things going on. I'm really interested to see what, Johnny Nansen can do as a defensive play caller and how it looks different from what Don Brown was doing last year, because I think fans really liked what he brought to the table as a defensive coordinator. And, I think fans were disappointed to lose him to UMass, but I do think this is going to be a more exciting blend of defense. You're going to have naturally just some more turnovers with the zone defense, and it's going to be more opportunities to make those game-changing big plays. Maybe you give up some more with this change in scheme, but I think they're going to have better opportunities to make some big plays, which fans always like. But I'm going 4-8 right now. We'll see. Maybe I'll reserve my judgment to change it after the first game. But if they come out and look really good against San Diego State, then I'm not completely opposed to them winning 6 games this year. But I think a lot is going to depend on what happens in the non-conference schedule, kind of as we say every year. So that's where I stand with things. Go ahead, Trey.
Yeah, no. I was going to say I agree. I was kind of teetering on that 5 to 6 win mark, and somebody in the media kind of convinced me the other day of 6 wins, and I can see it, but I get your standpoint. I think 4 to 6 wins overall in a season. Anywhere from there, I think Arizona fans have a lot to be happy, even with a 4-win season, because of where you've come from as a program the last couple of years.
If they get more than 6, if they get to 10 wins, Troy, give the man a lifetime contract. Name something after him.
Statue.
Name something after him. Name a building after him. But no, I mean, it would be interesting if they really do. I mean, maybe they're going to surprise everybody, and it's all going to come together. I mean, they do definitely have some better pieces and kind of more proven players at key positions, and I think that's the real thing to look at when you look at Arizona this season, is that they have some really key playmakers at some important positions, and I think that's going to be big. Assuming all of those skills from their other schools, especially the transfers, kind of what I'm talking about. If that transfers over and they can kind of carry that over from their previous stops, I think there's a lot of good things ahead. But let's get to our predictions for this upcoming game. I haven't really thought about it a whole lot, so this is going to be coming kind of off the top of my head. But I think it's a 6-point spread right now. I think San Diego State, last I checked, was a 6-point favorite. Obviously at home, opening a brand new stadium. A lot of things working against Arizona going into this game. How do you see it playing out this Saturday?
I wasn't feeling good when I saw this game on the schedule after the end of last season. But with the talent that they've added, the leadership at quarterback, I like Arizona's chances in this one. I'm not a big Braxton Burmeister fan. I think he was very subpar at Virginia Tech. I just don't think he does anything that amazes you. He can run a little bit. But I think Arizona wins this game. Not in a blowout, but I think they do pull away late. I think they win this game 30-19, gain 30 points on the Aztecs, and they get 2 turnovers, 2 fumbles that flip the tide.
Wow. I'm going Arizona win. I thought about not. I think there's a lot working against Arizona this week. Obviously, the new stadium is a big part of that. Going to be a lot of energy in that stadium. It's going to be not for Arizona. So that's something to consider. But I like the new pieces. I think there's going to be a lot of energy with this offense in particular. I think the defense is going to do some different things that maybe it hasn't done before. And so I'm going Arizona 27-24. So we'll see how it works out. We'll see what happens, but that's what I'm going with. And we'll kind of see how it all works out. But Troy will be there. I will be there this Saturday in San Diego. I'm imagining a lot of people watching this will be there. If not, they'll be watching on TV. 12:30 game. Everyone will be awake. It'll be fun. Big football Saturday, but we appreciate you watching. Yeah, we appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you next time.